Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis, and welcome to our new show, War with Iran, where we'll bring you stories and interviews from throughout the day that will hopefully help you walk away feeling a bit more informed. We begin with the U.S. military increasing its presence in the Middle East as Congress weighed a resolution to restrict military powers. We now know 50,000 American forces are in the region. The Pentagon released extraordinary images of a U.S. submarine sinking an Iranian warship in the Indian Ocean. The last time the U.S. did this to an enemy combatant ship in 1945. Roughly 180 crew were on board. 32 sailors were rescued. Iran is drawing more U.S. allies into the conflict as it retaliates against multiple countries. Today, a U.K. fighter jet shot down an Iranian drone over Jordan. Tonight, we're learning more about some of the Army reservists killed during that attack in Kuwait. Sergeant First Class Nicola Moore was just days away from returning home to her husband and 2 children. 20-year-old Sergeant Declan Cody, described as the rock of his family. We also just learned that Qatar is evacuating residents living near the U.S. Embassy as, quote, a precautionary measure. We have team coverage tonight. ABC's chief foreign correspondent Ian Pannell leads us off back in the region again tonight.
Tonight, the war with Iran rapidly expanding. For the first time since World War II, the U.S. Navy sinking an enemy ship with a torpedo fired from a fast attack submarine. Extraordinary video from the periscope of that American sub showing the massive explosion before the Iranian warship with 180 people on board sank to the bottom of the Indian Ocean.
America is winning, decisively, devastatingly, and without mercy.
The torpedo attack happened off the coast of Sri Lanka. Authorities there recovering dozens of bodies, saying only 32 people were rescued. That ship, one of at least 20 Iranian Navy vessels, the US says it's destroyed. Tonight, the Trump administration claiming US and Israeli forces control the sea and the skies over Iran. President Trump saying the US is in a very strong position.
We're in very good shape now. I want to let you know that, and we will continue forward. But it's a great display of military strength.
The Pentagon saying there are now more than 50,000 troops in the Middle East, with more on the way. The US now set to strike deeper into Iranian territory.
More and larger waves are coming. We are just getting started. We are accelerating, not decelerating. Iran's capabilities are evaporating by the hour, while American strength grows fiercer, smarter, and utterly dominant.
With officials revealing the current operation has delivered twice the air power of the shock and awe campaign of Iraq in 2003. Tonight, the Pentagon downplaying concerns U.S. missile stockpiles could run low if the war drags on.
We have sufficient precision munitions for the task at hand, both on the offense and defense. I appreciate the interest, but just know that we consider that an operational security matter.
There are also questions tonight about the number of U.S. interceptors across the Middle East being used by multiple countries to try to block these Iranian missiles and drones. Will the interceptors last? Because military officials say it takes 2 or 3 of them to shoot down just one Iranian ballistic missile. And experts predict Iran had a stockpile of more than 2,000. Tonight, Iran launching a new wave of strikes across the Gulf. A UK fighter jet shooting down an Iranian drone over Jordan. NATO saying it intercepted an Iranian ballistic missile over Syria that was heading for Turkey, as images emerge of an Iranian missile that slammed into a Syrian field. But US and Israeli officials say the Iranian attacks have slowed down. And from inside Iran, a harrowing account from a young anti-government activist in Tehran, bravely speaking out. We're not naming her to protect her identity.
It is very, very dangerous outside. Everybody from the regime has the gun. Most of them are very ugly and furious, and they have free will to shoot everybody. They don't think about anything.
She says people are happy the supreme leader's dead, but worried the war will stop before the regime is gone. The Red Crescent reporting over 1,000 deaths, with Iranian officials expected to elect a new supreme leader. One potential candidate, Ayatollah Khamenei's own son, Mujtaba, a hardliner likely to stick to his father's legacy, according to Iranian officials familiar with the deliberations. Israel's defense minister warning if Iran's new leader followed the same path as Khamenei, he would become an unequivocal target for elimination. Tonight, the US confirming the Iranian Revolutionary Guard commander, identified as the mastermind behind the 2024 plot to assassinate President Trump, has also been killed.
The leader of the unit who attempted to assassinate President Trump has been hunted down and killed. Iran tried to kill President Trump, and President Trump got the last laugh.
Ian, thank you. The Pentagon has identified some of the 6 Army reservists killed during a drone strike in Kuwait. Their unit was out of Des Moines, Iowa, the youngest reservist, just 20 years old. We're now hearing from some of their families about their lives at home and their dedication to service. Our chief global affairs anchor, Martha Raddatz, reports now from Tel Aviv.
Tonight, we are learning more about the first American soldiers who were killed in that Iranian drone strike in Kuwait.
I still don't fully think it's real. I didn't think it was real when they told us.
Sergeant Declan Cody was from Des Moines and just 20 years old. His sister Kira recalling the moment the doorbell rang and she got the news.
I really wish I got to tell him I love him one more time because he was just so amazing.
He had just been recommended for a promotion from specialist to sergeant. He was promoted posthumously. 39-year-old Sergeant First Class Nicola Moore, a mother of 2, was just days away from returning to her family in White Bear Lake, Minnesota. Husband Joey spoke to her just 2 hours before she was killed, telling the AP, "You don't go to Kuwait thinking something's going to happen." 42-year-old Sergeant First Class Noah Teachins, a father to a teenage son, had just 3 months left on his tour. His twin brother Nicholas telling the New York Times he just wanted to get there and get it over with and get back. John Coleman served alongside Teachins.
You could call him day or night. He always took the time. You know, he made you feel important. And that's hard to find sometimes in the military.
Captain Cody Cork's family says the 35-year-old lived with purpose, loved deeply, and served honorably. Childhood friend Chase Smith.
He's just all around good dude. You know, nobody would have thought in a million years it'd be him.
Late tonight, the Pentagon identified 2 other soldiers killed in that Iranian drone attack in Kuwait. Major Jeffrey R. O'Brien, 45, of Indianola, Iowa, and Chief Warrant Officer 3 Robert Marzan, 54, of Sacramento, California.
Martha, thank you. And coming up, our Kira Phillips gets right to the case and asks an advisor to Prime Minister Netanyahu the questions many are wondering. What is the plan and how is this different than Iraq? When we come back. Welcome back, everyone. Why did the U.S. have to strike Iran when it did? How is this different than the war in Iraq? And what is the plan? These are questions ABC News Live anchor Kira Phillips got to ask International Affairs Advisor and spokesperson for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Caroline Glick. Take a listen.
Caroline, good to see you again. You heard those remarks from President Trump. Did he convince the Israeli Prime Minister to go to war, or was it the other way around?
No, I think I think his concerns were very important for the decision of when to go. You know, the concept of Iran striking preemptively is something that we were all very, very concerned with, and there were other reasons as well from an operational perspective. But that was pressing concern for us and for the president. Yes.
So it was Israel that wanted President Trump to do this, or President Trump reaching out to Israel? I just want to be clear.
No, I mean, we've been working in partnership with the Americans on the Iran issue very, very closely for many months, particularly since Operation Midnight Hammer and Rising Lion in June. And what we saw that was very alarming to us is that, as President Trump and Secretary Rubio have said in recent days, the Iranians were rebuilding their missile arsenal, and they were continuing to view it as a shield for their nuclear weapons program, because what they were seeking to do, and what they're moving towards doing, and in fact beginning to do, is have an industrial line that was going to produce 100 missiles a month, and we're only capable of producing 7 interceptor missiles a month, and that would have overwhelmed our defenses, not only for Israel and the United States, but for all of the Arab countries in the Gulf and beyond. so that they would have this impermeable thing that they would be able to attack with in an overwhelming manner. I mean, just remember the force of these missiles. They're the size of buses. We had a missile attack here in Israel on a synagogue. 8 people were killed by this one missile. So imagine if we had hundreds and hundreds of them escaping our defenses, moving through our defenses and hitting Israel, hitting Saudi Arabia, hitting their oil installations, hitting Europe. They've already attacked Cyprus, which is an EU member state. Today they attacked Turkey. So imagine that all of this was going on, and under that shield, they were able to build nuclear weapons. And what we saw was that they were moving these installations underground. And if they had moved them underground, if that had actually happened, then they would have been immune to assault. And they would have been able to go forward on this maniacal plan without obstacles. So, from that perspective, it was imperative to move. And from the perspective that we were very, very concerned, and the president certainly voiced the concern that they were going to preemptively attack, we moved when we did.
So, and I understand everything that you've just laid out. I don't think anybody's disputing that Iran has a brutal regime, and both Israel and the U.S. had plans to take them down. And now it's a full-out war, and both sides are saying until this military is obliterated, that it's going to continue. But what we're trying to figure out is we've received conflicting messages about why this war was executed when it was. And the president came out in the Oval yesterday and said, I may have forced Israel to do this. Do you agree with the president? Did he force your hand and say, let's go now?
Force is maybe not the word that I would have chosen, although it's a
what
fine
word. Would you choose?
Just in the sense that we've been working together, and he leads decisions, and we go along with it. And if there's and we have a conversation. It's a conversation that we have, and so the concerns are voiced by all sides. And by the way, it's not that you're getting conflicting reports. I think you should look at it more like you're getting more information. And, and over time, you get more details about the thought process that went into attacking when we did and why we had to attack. And in general, what is Iran? What is this regime that declared war on the United States and Israel 47 years ago and has been waging that war with all the means at their disposal for 47 years? And not to mention, they've been keeping all of the countries in the Gulf and beyond under a threat of constant terror. Europe, there's almost no country in Europe that hasn't suffered from Iranian terrorism, Latin America as well, Africa as well. So, you're looking at the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism and purveyor of terrorism and funder of terrorism. They're developing a massive ballistic missile arsenal and a nuclear arsenal.
Sure, and we've reported on all of that. Nobody's disputing that at all. And it sounds like you're saying the President of the United States took the lead and the Prime Minister went along.
Absolutely.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you so much. All right, what is the joint goal of this war, Caroline? What does victory look like to you?
Victory for us, the true victory for us looks like the Iranian people having the conditions set by the U.S. and Israeli militaries. They can take their destiny in their own hands. These are people that have been held hostage by this regime for 47 years and have suffered under its jackboot through mass terror, torture, and mass murder. I mean, they just murdered tens of thousands of their people in the streets who were just demanding freedom, asking for freedom, begging for freedom not 2 months ago. So, these are people that desperately want to get out from under this jackboot of this regime. And what we're doing is we're trying to provide them with the conditions that will enable them to seize their destiny. And in the meantime, we're removing the imminent threat and pushing it back for years at a minimum, that this horrible, heinous, death cult poses to Israel, poses to the states of the Arab world, poses to Europe, and poses to the United States.
And your intelligence, Israeli intelligence was vital in tracking down the Ayatollah. That is clear. And in the strike that killed him and the huge swath of Iran's top leadership. There were follow-up strikes targeting more of Iran's leadership. Is the goal of this war, Caroline, for Israel regime change? Is that what Israel wants, is regime change?
What we want is to empower the Iranian people to do what they've been fighting to do for 47 years, which is take their destiny in their own hands. We're not going to be, dictating things for them. We don't call the shots. What we do is we hear them. 80% in polling that's been going back years of Iranians hate this regime, hate it. And we're talking about from across all sections and swaths of Iranian society, which is a multi-ethnic, multi-confessional society. And they all hate the regime. It doesn't matter if they're Baluchis or Kurds or Azeris or Persians. They all hate this regime. They all want to move beyond it.
So
and
how
if
will
that
Israel help
happens,
them?
if God willing, that happens. Well,
How
we're
will Israel step in and help the people then?
Well, we are helping them now by undermining the stability and weakening the grip on power of this regime.
But what about leadership? I mean, clearly Israel would like to see a different form of leadership here. So the hatred and the tyranny that you talk about can come to an end in the region. So what is it exactly Israel wants to see, and how will you help the Iranian people achieve that when it comes to leadership, the next leader of Iran?
Look, I think President Trump has been very clear, that this is their moment, this is their time, this is the time of the Iranian people to seize their destiny. Not this minute, right? It's very dangerous outside still. There are bombs going off all over the place. But, what we're doing, they asked for help. And as President Trump said, and as Prime Minister Netanyahu have said, help has arrived. And help takes many forms. And right now, what it's taking forms of is bombing is destroying the ability of the regime to cause havoc and mayhem and mass death worldwide, and also to remove their ability to continue to conduct mass murder of the Iranian people. That's what we're working towards. That's what when we're praying for them, that they're going to be able to do.
Well, this was the conversation when the Iraq War took place as well, and we saw what happened there. It's been a disaster with regard to leadership. There wasn't a plan after Operation Iraqi Freedom to help with a transitional government that would work, that would survive. So what is the plan now? We haven't been able to get a clear outline from the President of the United States. Does Israel have a plan? Can you tell us any details about a transitional government, or how you're going to support, once the bombs start dropping, how you're going to support the Iranian people in creating leadership there in Iran that will be good for all of you within the region?
Well, look, what I can tell you is two things. One is that we've been planning this operation for a very long time with the Americans. This isn't something that started, a Saturday morning. That's one thing. The other thing that I can say is that you can't compare. I mean, it's easy, it's obvious, it begs comparison, right? Because Iraq is next door, but it's not the same. The Americans invaded Iraq, they conquered Iraq, with their allies. Here, we're not doing. There are no ground forces. America hasn't sent ground forces into Iran. This is
But the president said it could be a possibility.
An Air Force mission.
President Trump has said he's not discounting putting American troops on the ground.
Well, we'll have to see. But that's, the president is going to decide what's in the interest of the United States. At this point, there's, from a military perspective, there's really no comparison between what's happening today in Iran and what happened in Iraq in 2003. It's a different thing. And by the way, so much of what we're doing today is based on hard-learned lessons from Iraq and from Afghanistan. I mean, the Americans are very smart. President Trump is extremely smart. He understands what went wrong in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and he, together with the Secretary of War and the Secretary of State, and all of the senior officials in the military and in intelligence and throughout the U.S. administration that are involved, they are schooled in what happened and what went wrong and why. And this is a totally different operation. It's a completely different operation, and it's being done by people who saw, really from the outset, as President Trump did, the weaknesses of what happened in Iraq. and why it wasn't going to achieve the results that the U.S. had hoped for.
And I've interviewed.
You have to bear that in mind.
Yes, and look, I was there in Iraq 4 different times, witnessed the destruction and the chaos myself, and I have interviewed military leaders that were involved in that mission, even lawmakers, ambassadors. They have all said to me, and they've said it on record here on ABC, that they are concerned that Iran could turn into another Iraq. So yes, there is this campaign going on to completely obliterate the government and the regime, the military. But then what do you do after that? Just pull out and leave the Iranian people to take over for themselves? I mean, there's got to be some clear plan, some sort of idea where the U.S. and Israel are going to help, if indeed that's the plan, the Iranian people rise up and figure out a way to lead their country. And there's been talk of, Reza Pahlavi, there's been talk of other people that were in line, but apparently they've all now been killed, and that's kind of all we have right now. So there's a lot of concern. This could just turn into another Iraq without a doubt. So what's the plan? Is there a plan? Can you give us anything on behalf of Israel as it works with the United States on the plan after the bombs stop dropping?
Of course, there's a plan, and what I can tell you also is, before we began this interview, you were talking about. You were talking to the widow of one of the U.S. servicemen who was killed in Kuwait since the outset of hostilities. One of 6 brave American heroes whose passing we mourn here in Israel. And we've been at war now for 2.5 years, and we understand the cost of war. The Prime Minister understands the cost of war. He lost his brother in battle. He himself was injured. Rescuing passengers in a hijacked airplane. And, he's had comrade die in his arms in battle. We lost 932, I think, of our soldiers, of our most loved sons and daughters in this war. We know. Nobody takes this lightly. Nobody thinks that this is going to be a cakewalk, and nobody is saying, oh, let's just go helter-skelter and whatever will be, will be. And you're right to want to know all the answers to the questions. But, just as you said, we're getting conflicting answers about why now. And I said, no, I don't believe you're getting conflicting answers, information. I think that you're getting more information. And I think that over time you'll get more information. And I know nobody wants to hear the words, oh, trust us, because how can you ever trust anybody, especially not in war and not when you have people's lives are at stake. The people of Israel who go to the bomb shelters 5, 6, 7 times a day for the past 4 days, and really for the past 2.5 years, we've been running back and forth from time to time. We know. Nobody takes this lightly. Nobody's done this lightly. This is a war that is going to settle accounts with a regime that has been raining terror down on this earth for the past 47 years. There's a side here, and the Iranian people are on the side of good here. And we're going to do everything that we can to give them the option, to give them the conditions that they can seize their destiny.
Our thanks to Kira, and our thanks to you for joining our new show, War with Iran. I'm Lindsay Davis. Stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Good night.